Hi, guys, and welcome back to the new edition of the Daily Eye Show. I'm Salim Asgarally,
Hi, I'm Veenaa Bakshi.
and we are going to be talking about education today. Education, which is one of the prime propellers of any economy, which will help to take us into the league of developed nations of the world. So, Veena, since education is such an important need of the country, where do you think we stand today as far as our education system goes?
It's a very strange thing, Salim. The 2019 budget for defense,
Yeah,
okay, is 4,31,011 crores.
okay,
Nice.
huge,
Education is 94,854 crores.
which is
Only 3,36,157 crores lesser than the defense budget. So it almost seems like the government is, helping people more go to war or protect the country rather than educate people. I mean, education is, it's like when you look around us and you say, oh God, what an uneducated lot. Oh God, don't these guys have an education? It's about so many things. It's about awareness. It's about knowledge. It's about just knowing. It's about understanding. So if we're going to have a budget for education, which is one third of a defense budget, where you're encouraging people, or rather you're putting this thing into people's heads about, yeah, we're ready to go to war. But those are uneducated people or uneducated decisions being taken probably. I mean, what's the use of such a huge budget when you're not educating people, when you're not giving them the knowledge, when you're not giving them that awareness of whether to make a choice which is good or bad, a calculated choice, an educated choice. So I'm not being able to understand why these budgets, are gone so haywire. And right now, there is also this news article that has been around that there's a possibility that education is going to be cut by something like 30,000 crores.
That's really pathetic, especially when you consider that, okay, you have a defense budget, which may or may not be necessary for a country. But on the other hand, you do have huge statues which are being made where, tons of money are being expended
Exactly.
for, of course, the heroes of our nation, like, Sardar Patel was one of the heroes of the nation. And I'm sure he would have liked that money to be diverted to your
To
education budget.
Exactly.
But sadly, so that hasn't happened. And I think what you say is absolutely correct, because if you look at it, and the figures that present themselves, the teacher to student ratio, for instance, is one of the lowest in the world.
Yeah.
So we have 24 students to one teacher, whereas countries like Sweden, which you just mentioned, have 12 to 1. And when your student teacher ratio is low, it puts not only a lot of pressure on the teacher to be able to deliver and educate so many children,
Absolutely.
but at the same time, it does not propagate the culture of investigation, a culture of analysis, the
No.
culture of thinking,
Absolutely. It becomes
which is so important a part of education.
which becomes a study by rote then.
Completely. And that's what we see in our education system, that children are carrying more books today than they have in their head.
Yep.
So experiences really don't matter so much as learning by rote. And then there is
Absolutely,
the
yes.
examination system,
Yeah.
which creates a lot of panic, not only in parents, in students themselves.
My
You
God.
actually see suicide rates going up
As
in
it comes closer to
school
exam
children
time.
and teenagers.
Yeah.
As it comes closer, because the fear of failure is so great, because you have an exam system there which questions your ability to remember and memorize rather than your ability to think.
And to understand a concept.
Absolutely.
Conceptual learning is not something which is encouraged in schools in India.
So when a teacher walks into a classroom, especially with addressing the rural areas and sub-rural areas, yeah, you have first generation children over there who've come to education. Their parents haven't taken education.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so not only are they linguistically not prepared, but they are also still very new to the system. So for them to be able to absorb that is not there. Also, there's psychological ability of the students.
Yep.
The teacher is not trained in that respect to be able to assess them psychologically so that they can deliver on a one-to-one basis. So there is no one-to-one delivery here, it's mass delivery.
Absolutely. And whoever on that crowd picks it up.
Picks it up.
Picks it
If
up.
you don't, and
If
if
you
you
don't,
missed
that's too
out,
bad.
too bad. Or then, when you come to urban and suburban areas, you have these tutorial classes,
Oh, yes.
which are becoming extremely expensive.
Do you know, Salim, a lot of these tutorial classes, speaking of that, today actually replace colleges. They
Yes.
have their own programs,
Yes.
for students, where students don't really go to colleges, but they go to these tutorial classes, which have their own programs that end up like a BSc or a BA or a BCom or whatever.
Right.
But these are not college-oriented programs.
They're not college oriented programs, and what they do is they prepare you for a particular examination. So everything is about an examination. It's about those numbers and those marks and those percentages that you get. It's not about how evolved that education has made you,
Absolutely.
how much it has increased your ability to think. It's just about how well did you remember everything that you read up on or learned by rote and out over there. So there is a great need to change, I think, our system of learning.
It really seems like the government is not vested at all. They're not invested at all in what they want to do as far as children are concerned.
There are no goals and aims, and even if they are, I think they really have not been looked into in the right way and manner as to actually what is
No,
needed.
there's this very strange thing, which I read somewhere, which is that the poor don't attend because of lack of affordability.
Yes, and also access.
And yeah, this is access is one of the things.
Yeah.
Is lack of, and the rich don't attend. I mean, this is as far as I'm talking the semi-rural and rural
Yeah.
areas, and the rich don't attend because of lack of facilities.
Correct.
Okay, it's because there's no bathroom in the school.
Yeah.
There's facilities. Is how do you get over there? Some of the schools are miles away from home. The children have to walk for so many kilometers to get there.
And one of the things that is put forth in government schools is the daily meal program, which is actually to incentivize children from deprived backgrounds to come to school. The question that actually comes forth is, how do we incentivize more children to come to school, I think, and be able to train teachers in the right manner so that they can actually make a difference in the lives of those children. The government needs to do something in terms of, even when you're looking at the National Education Policy of 2019.
Yeah.
When you read through it and when you hear the opinion of experts on the National Education Policy, you come to realize that it really does not aim. It has very good goals, like education should be inclusive and it should be democratic and it should be for all, and we should be able to educate and create literacy by 2025.
Right.
But it does not provide the infrastructure that is necessary. There are great programs out there to be done, but the coming together of all that doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah. One of the very well done CSR programs, in fact, very well invested CSR programs in this is Teach India by Times of India.
All right.
So they have put in money over there, where Teach India basically, yes, it doesn't go right down to the primary level of education, but Teach India, basically what they're stressing on is spoken English.
Okay.
Okay, easy spoken English for children of an age group of 8 to 16. And they train people who volunteer, saying that I want to be a part of Teach India. So they train people over some 3 or 4 weeks in how they should go about it. And they're constantly monitored, even the ones who are trained. And I think you have to give your time for 3 or 4 times a week, where you have a number of students, like 8 or 10 or something, and where you teach them to speak proper spoken English. Having said that, having gone to that, is coming back to this thing, is one of the things that I feel what you're talking about is the lack of teachers. Is, have you realized, Salim? I mean, sure you notice is that teachers are given so much of extra work other than teaching.
Like election duties for one, I know.
Election duty. So
Yeah.
schools are shut.
Yeah.
Okay, no education, sit at home, holiday for all those days because teachers are doing election duty.
Right.
Teachers are doing census.
So yeah, teachers are given so many duties, curriculums don't get completed in time, and children suffer.
Absolutely. So I think even there has to be, and teachers have complained about this. Teachers have protested.
Yeah, but nobody has really heard.
Nobody's listening to
Okay.
them.
So that is one of the things that nobody really listens. I think there should be a democratization of education where everyone should be able to get the same kind and quality of education available to all, which now has just become the privilege of a few rich people.
On that note, we should move to our next segment, which is a very exciting segment.
Yes, of course, we have going to be having with us a specialist in education, Meera Bhalla, who will be joining us in segment 2. So don't go away. We'll be back after a short break and have you meet with Meera Bhalla. And we have with us today none other than Meera Bhalla, who is from the Singapore International School and has been an educator for the last 30 years. Meera comes with very rich experience in education and teaching and is currently involved with CAS. Hi, Meera, and welcome to the Daily Eye Show.
Hi.
Hi, Meera.
Hi.
You have been involved, Meera, with CAS, as you told us just before we started recording. And would you like to tell us a little more about CAS and what is this?
Okay. CAS is a program that is offered in all IB schools. And CAS stands for Creativity, Activity and Service. So any student who's studying on the International Baccalaureate program has to put in a certain amount of hours or effort into creativity, activity, and service. So I coordinate that for the school, ensuring that we have a student right from the beginning, from kindergarten onwards, getting some aspects of the CAS program, and by the time they come into the IB, that's the 11th and 12th grade, they are able to actually get involved in these activities on their own and have a rich experience which will take them forward.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. I think creativity, activity, and service are three very important pillars of education, I would say. And I'm glad that,
And society.
and society, and I'm glad that attention is being focused on these elements.
Meera, before this, you have, I think, spent many, many years in primary education with the younger lot. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so I have been, to start with, a primary teacher. I worked in a Montessori school and then with a international school, not an IB school, and then moved on to the IB program. And I have, for the last 30 years, been in teaching. I was also mentoring and training teachers. We have a foundation called the Reggio Emilia India Foundation, where I was looking at teacher training for early years educators. And it was teaching them to be able to deliver through inquiry. So we have the child go through education being in control of his own learning. So you make it possible for them to explore and learn from their own experiences rather than setting a program for them which you decide needs to be. So it's inquiry based, it's fun learning, it's also directed by the child according to how and what they want to learn.
Why is it that this kind of a curriculum is not being initiated into other
Yeah.
programs run by public schools, for instance? So, why do we see the segmentation where private schools are able to provide a better quality of education, which actually should be, education should be democratic, it should be available and accessible to all? So, what are your views on this?
Actually, the reason, it's very clear in a country like ours with the kind of numbers we have, for education to be where it's directed by the learner. You have to deal with smaller groups, so there has to be the teacher-student ratio has to be good enough. We look at something like 8 to 10 students to a teacher, and it's impossible in a public space to have that kind of because we don't have that many trained teachers in the country, and it's also I think to do with affordability. So some of the privileged people who have that kind of money can maybe send their children to schools where the teacher-student ratio is such, and there is that kind of education available.
Mentioning the teacher-student ratio, Veena, I think what Meera just mentioned, 8:1, is fantastic. because the highest student teacher ratio is with Sweden, which is 12 is to 1.
Yes.
And we, on a larger level in the country, are at 24 is to 1. Some people were saying, I was reading, in Maharashtra, apparently in 2019, it dipped down to 27 is to 1. So,
But that too, Salim, sounds like a dream ratio, 27 to 1, because we all of us are aware of a lot of public schools where
Yeah.
there's like 60 students crammed into a class.
correct, correct.
And most times they have this one teacher who's handling. So, how many of those 60 students are really getting educated is anybody's guess.
It's impossible for one person to actually reach out to 60 children at the same time.
Yeah.
And in colleges, the ratio is even higher.
What do you think? How can education be democratized better?
It has to be some system which lays a foundation, because what is going to happen in the next maybe decade is that there will be jobs which we have never heard of. The student who comes out of the educational institution will probably be doing things that he himself had no idea of. And for that, it has to be somebody who is capable of learning on his own. So that self-directed kind of learning, or being master of what you want to learn, is something that needs to be inculcated from the beginning. Currently, the system is such where it's all pushed down the throat of a child, and they sort of mug up, or they have what you call it rote learning. And once they're out of school or college, they easily forget what they have learned. Whereas if you give the child the skills to be able to become a lifelong learner, they can direct their learning towards what interests them. So that is the kind of learning one needs to have in schools. And that in a country like India is a tall order, because you need to have very well trained teachers who can set up an environment of that kind of learning.
Tell me one thing: isn't there a possibility? I mean, I'm just asking. Maybe it's a dream question. Is this CAS learning, or the ratio India school learning? Isn't there a way that it can be created to be able to bring it to a level of affordability, so it's practiced even in government schools or?
I think it's a mindset change that needs to come in throughout. It's not impossible. I mean, we had the Rishi Gurukul system,
Right.
and the Shanti Niketans,
Yeah.
where that was the kind of learning that took place. So it's not something that is foreign to us, but it's about having the passion and the ability to set up that kind of
Right.
environment.
Right.
So basically, the powers that be
Yes.
need to take that
Relook at.
decision and be.
And I think we need to look at education, not only the higher education, but the early years. It has to start with the foundation. Unless we lay a good foundation and we enable or empower children to start thinking for themselves, start exploring, becoming creative, becoming innovators, and then developing those skills right from the beginning, is only then can they start thinking out of the box when they go into
Of course.
education.
So, what do you think about taking education online in a larger way, especially for a country like India, where it's access to mobile phones is easier than access to a school. For a school, you might have to still walk 2 miles before they reach a school where there may be a teacher, there may not be a teacher. So,
See, I am not such a great believer in only depending on online education, because there is a human element. And it's only when a teacher recognizes a spark in a child, or there is that human aspect to it, can you actually create it. It can't be a general environment which every child is exposed to and will, because everyone is working at a different pace. So I'm not so sure that that is the way ahead. I feel there is more need for smaller community-based schools where you have motivated and passionate teachers who direct the learning and encourage children to start exploring, right? Because actually the curiosity is the highest at that age. That's from 0 to 5 years. And that's the time the children are absolutely open to taking risks, absorbing things. And if we start that young, we can actually have a populace who will look ahead and become. You can't put children into slots.
Okay.
Like you come 3 times a week and you do this. It has to be something, I would say it should be as open as, giving them the freedom to maybe if they are engrossed, go on for hours on the same activity.
All right.
So there has to be that kind of flexibility,
Right.
and that can only happen if there's a individual involved who is directing that learning.
Yeah, because we were talking about this earlier, is that it has been, I mean, these were recent survey which found that a grade 5 student couldn't read a grade 2 book. So where do you think is the lack, Meera?
It is that the child has not been exposed to the kind of learning they should have at that particular age.
So is
because
that-
developmentally, if you look at the development theories, there are certain milestones. And for instance, in India today, we expect children as young as 3 and 5 to be writing, which is actually a very wrong
Absolutely.
thing to do, because they're physically not developed to hold a pencil.
All right.
So when we start with very young children, we actually hand them over thick crayons or something that they can grip on. And we start too early to expect them to write, and then obviously there is a gap. And that probably is why there have been instances where there are students who are in the 5th grade not able to read.
So are we going to see in the future these super developed kids coming out of urban areas who've
Let me
had the
answer the
best of
question.
private education, and then you have rural children who probably have not had enough of school? So what do you think is going to be our
Actually,
future?
there's something that they are heading for. In either case, there's a problem, because when you talk about these super children who are going from one class to the other, they still are not being allowed to think for themselves. They are being pushed into one activity after the other. And students who are maybe left to fend for themselves are actually developing some of their creativity and their thinking skills through hands-on activities. They may not be going to regular school. So there is, it has to be a mix of both.
So there is an
The
organic
opportunity-
balance that is happening
Yes,
on its
yes.
own, which is wonderful, I would think.
And I think it's important that a child is comfortable in the language in which he is learning, because they need to have a vocabulary to be able to understand what is being delivered in the classroom.
Very good.
So sending a child who doesn't speak English, has no exposure to a classroom where the teacher's holding a conversation in English, is actually counterproductive, because he's probably switched off, he doesn't know what's going on.
What is poor? Because a grade 5 student can't read a grade 2 book. So where is the problem exactly in all this?
I can give you an example of the Reggio method that we in school are inspired by, because Reggio Emilia is a very small place in Italy where they adopted this method, and they call them the infant toddler centers. It was after the World War, and they were looking at a new generation coming up while the parents were all struggling to get back. So there was this man by the name of Loris Malaguzzi who set up these infant toddler centers, and the community was involved to the extent the people living there actually helped construct these centers, and then the children were left there while the parents went out and worked, and there was somebody to take care of the child as well as the child's education. And they have flexi timings. Even till today, their schools are like that. You can drop the child in the morning and come late in the evening, or midway through. They don't insist following a regular time. And the children come there and they learn through inquiry, like I was saying. So the child is allowed to explore. And the community is involved to such an extent that they actually take them out. There may be a project or an activity involving a restaurant where the children actually go out to the restaurant and they sit there and they are allowed to. And there's nothing like you can't do this, and there's that, as long as there's no risk to life. So if we can have that kind of education, we'll actually be developing minds that will be able to not just take risks but also think for themselves. On paper, the government systems that are in place, you have the balwadis and the anganwadis are exactly this. But it's not run in that spirit.
I see.
And very often the teacher who is running the balwadi or the anganwadi is not equipped to deal with children that age in terms of education or how they need to. So if we can have a program in place where these women who are picked up from the community to be part of those, to run those balwadis, are actually empowered to be able to do a good job. So teacher education becomes very important.
Exactly.
Meena, tell us about your early start, the diamond.
So, in fact, this takes me back to when I started my career after passing out of Tata Institute. I was working at the Diamond Jubilee School in Bhendi Bazaar, which is run by the Aga Khan Foundation as their social worker. And that's a first generation school at that time. So the girls who came to study there had parents who were not educated. So I used to actually move out into the community, go and meet with the mothers. I had some programs we had started where the mothers would come in and we would talk about health and hygiene just to get them involved. So that is the kind of education, especially when you go out into the hinterland or the villages, that would make a big difference to.
Very true. I think
Yeah.
that's very well put by you, Meera. So, what is it that you think should be put forth into teachers' training, which is currently not being done in our so-called programs for training teachers?
Actually, I think the B.Ed program is pretty extensive. It is very, I mean, whoever has set up the curriculum has gone into it seriously. It's not something that's people are passing time and coming out of B.Ed schools.
Yes.
But then there are people who did B.Ed 30 years ago. What has been done with them since? So, and teaching is a profession that takes a lot out of you. So there has to be constantly upgradation, there has to be professional development like we do in other industries and other professions where people have courses, they have workshops, they are sent out to, enhance their skills. So why not for the teachers?
Right.
Also within schools, if the schools can set up a mentoring program for their teachers, they can have discussion groups where you learn from each other.
Right.
I mean, I'm in favor, I used to encourage it when I was involved with mentoring teachers, about them going and observing another person's lesson and maybe giving feedback, positive as well as negative, and also learning from that.
Talking with you has been so interesting. I'm just getting greedy and want to ask
And
you
there's more and more
questions.
questions coming up, I know.
Thank you so much, Meera Bhalla, for being with us on this segment of the show.
Pleasure.
And
Yes, thank you
you've-
so much. It's been such a
Thank
wonderful
you.
time talking to you.
You've given us such interesting information, and especially the note with which we ended, where education should be all about fun and play, and you should enjoy yourself and want to come back to school the next day.
Yes.
So, on that note, Meera, we shall take a short break and meet you on the other side, where we are going to be talking about education, where it concerns fashion, media, and entertainment. So, don't go away, stay with us. Wow, that was such an interesting episode we had with Meera Bhalla,
I know.
the educator and teacher. And taking it from there, we were talking about education as it exists for media, fashion, and entertainment. Veena, you want to start on that one?
It's thank you. And in terms of media, I was going through these figures as to how does education appear in media. Okay?
Right.
So does anybody in TV channels, reportage, and anybody talk about education? I'm not speaking about those pages saying get educated here and get educated there, but about education or the lack of education.
Right.
And I discovered this very sad figure of there is 1.3% coverage on TV channels and on newspapers when stories related to education or lack of it. Okay, a survey by QS Digital Solutions says that there is an increase in online channels,
All right.
okay, covering education. So online channels, but there's nothing in terms of television as such. Where once upon a time you had programs for children which were education programs.
In the black and white era.
Yes. I know which continued a little bit into color,
It
but
did.
now TV hardly does anything.
Yeah, because TV has become purely entertainment, and I think education somehow does not fit that bill of entertainment.
No, because there aren't no TRPs unless it's something very dramatic. Like, for instance, we keep talking about harping on that story of children getting stoned in food and salt to eat and milky, watery milk and all that kind of stuff. Unless it's like TRP driven programs.
Yeah.
And in terms of entertainment, again, this was a very sad thing. But this movies that are made on education in India,
Yeah.
okay, are movies which mock education.
Oh, really?
Okay, like for instance, two prime examples is Munna Bhai and Three Idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, instead of encouraging education or having a movie talk about it, these are movies that are being made which mock education.
Mm-hmm.
The one film which speaks about this great mathematician of Indian origin, Ramanujam,
I have watched that film, yes.
that film was made by an American producer.
And it was wonderful. It was really very lifting to watch the
Yeah, but
entire film.
we don't recognize our educators. We don't recognize the people in our country.
Yeah.
You know, who are educators. We have to wait for somebody to bring it us from foreign land. You know, and there's nothing being done here. There's the first woman who went through so much in her life to get education to women, Savitribai Phule. You're not able to make her film because she has gone so, she is so anti-government, all government, anti-establishment rather.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that people who are trying to make a film on her life are constantly being stalled. You know, so if you're not going to make education into an exciting TRP driven drama, how does one even look at it from a different point of view?
Because
Salim?
I think where this really, the problem really lies is education is today not looked at as a fun kind of a thing. It is looked at something that is stressful, it is exam related.
Yeah.
It's about how you're going to perform. It's not about really how you've increased in your knowledge base.
Yeah, like there's one film that was made on where children really did well, went to IIT and stuff, that teacher in Bihar, Super 30. And what do? They made it into his hero journey. You know, where the kids in the film who were actually, which should have actually been the heroes,
Yes.
about how they studied, the situations they came from, and how they studied. And, you know, yes, that teacher did whatever he did for them, but even it's those kids, you know, who wanted to study and are today in IITs and professors and things like that. But even that film was not really about education, it was about one hero's journey.
You know, what you're saying is very relevant because today, when you look at it, one of the worst things that is happening in the rural areas as far as education goes is the dropout rate.
Yes.
You know, students drop out for various reasons because A, there is not enough money, there is poor access to schools, the incentive to go to school is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if they make films which incentivize children to want to go to school, show it and project it as a fun kind of a thing, I'm sure it's going to make a difference.
It definitely
Of
will.
course, in where I come from, in fashion, yeah, I think the story is a little different.
Okay.
Because, you know, as we were talking in segment one, where education today has become a very commercial activity. So we have all these kinds of schools that have mushroomed, which give you a fashion education.
Right.
Again, they're all diploma based. There are very, very few which are actually tied up with a major university or have government sanctions to be able to run degrees which are as per curriculum.
Right.
But even those are not delivered because A, you don't have trained professionals
Right.
or teachers who can be able to deliver it in the right manner. They don't have the equipment, they don't have the space. They run out of pokey holes. So what happens is when we take on these kids as trainees
Yeah.
or interns, we have to start all over from scratch.
Absolutely.
Actually, you know, so I have been looking at this gap that has happened for a long time, and me and my business partners decided to set up a company called Innovative Ideas Inc., which bridges this gap. So what we do is bridge the gap between school learning and ground realities.
Okay.
So to be able to tell someone or a kid that, listen, you want to become a fashion designer, excellent, great. What are you going to do after that? Have you thought about it, for instance? Have you set your career goals in fashion? Let's say I want to set up a boutique. Do you really know what it is to set up a boutique
set up
or
a
your own
boutique, yeah.
brand? And if you don't, do you know what's a business plan? you should really be talking to a whole lot of people. So we actually have seminars where we have them meet with industry professionals, those who have succeeded in setting up successful fashion businesses.
On that note,
On that note, we come to an end to segment 3 of our episode today on education. Please get back to us with your comments and feedback, and we'd love to hear from you, and we'll be with you again on another episode of The Daily Eye Show.
the Daily Eye Show.